said she was just a blind woman from the mountains, that her visions were dreams, not destiny, but one by one. Her words are showing up in the news fire falling from the sky, the Middle East in flames, the silence before the world changes forever. She warned of a war that begins without a declaration, of leaders smiling while betrayal grows inside their walls, not with bombs, but with confusion. And now, right on schedule, the pieces are moving, cities prepare, alliances fracture, machines hum quietly beneath diplomacy. This isn't a story from the past. It's a prophecy stepping into the present. She was blind, poor, lived in a remote village most people couldn't even find on a map. And yet, the most powerful men in Eastern Europe traveled hundreds of miles just to sit in her kitchen. Her name, Vanga, a woman whose words once dismissed as superstition have now become echoes in the headlines of 2025. People called her a prophet, a psychic, a fraud, even a witch. But one thing they couldn't deny her accuracy: the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of radical terror in the Middle East, even the day New York would fall silent under a black sky. She saw it all without eyes, but there was one prophecy that stood out, one that even the Bulgarian government quietly archived. A warning not meant to be spoken publicly. It was about the future, a war, a great fire, a world broken in three, and at the center of it all, a region that has burned for centuries, the Middle East. Today, we're not here to prove whether Vanga was a prophet or not. We're here because the events unfolding now match her words more closely than we're comfortable admitting. If you're watching this, it's not by accident. Something is being revealed, and you're part of it. Look around. Iran says it's ready for war. Israel says it's ready to finish it. The US is moving warships. Russia is issuing threats. And ordinary people, they're caught in between missiles and misinformation. But Vanga once said it wouldn't start with tanks or soldiers. It would begin with a spark, in a dry place, under a hot sky. She described the desert as the matchbox of humanity. And now, that box is open. Syria is a chessboard. Lebanon is shaking, Gaza bleeds daily. Iran tests long-range missiles while Israel intercepts drones. Global oil prices swing with every explosion. Civilians run, starve, vanish, and the world scrolls on. She warned of a fire that would rise not just from weapons, but from the hearts of angry men. Religious pride, old revenge, ancient promises. A region soaked in stories and soaked in blood, and in the background, nations prepare weapons that could silence the earth in one breath. This isn't fiction. This is what happens when prophecy and politics meet, and the fuse, it's already lit. Vanga never gave exact dates. She never handed out predictions like fortune cookies. What she did was speak in symbols, in riddles, and somehow, in those strange and poetic words, people found events that hadn't happened yet but would. One of her most chilling messages came years before the world had ever heard of 9/11 Syria or drone warfare. She said, "A great war will start in the desert. It will begin with anger and end in silence, the silence of dust, of ash, of cities that no longer have names." Back then, it sounded like myth, a metaphor, maybe. But today, it feels like the headlines. She spoke of weapons that could burn the sky, and machines that don't need pilots but will kill like ghosts. This was decades before military drones or autonomous warfare. Her words were strange, and yet they fit. She also said that the land of ancient prophets will bleed again, and the blood will call out to the oceans. Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. The entire cradle of civilization now bathed in the kind of conflict she warned us about. She mentioned the day when 3 cities fall and the world holds its breath. Some say that means capitals. Others believe it's symbolic, maybe of alliances or even spiritual centers. But here's the thing, those 3 cities, depending on who you ask, they've already fallen. She predicted a fire unseen that would sweep across borders, not carried by bombs, but by wind, words, and fear. Sounds like biological weapons, doesn't it? Or maybe something worse, something we haven't invented yet. Skeptics say people are just forcing her words to match the news. But how do you explain the accuracy of someone who said the blackbirds will fly into tall towers? Years before 2 planes struck the World Trade Center, she didn't just see war as bombs and blood. She saw it as collapse, as unraveling. The war, she said, will not just be fought in deserts, but in hearts. And that's where her prophecy becomes personal. Because if she's right, this isn't just about nations, it's about people. About whether we carry fire or water inside of us, whether we build or burn, whether we see or stay blind. And in that sense, every one of us is part of the prophecy. Prophecies like hers aren't meant to terrify. They're meant to wake us up. They force us to stop and ask, what choices are we making that lead us closer to fire? What systems are we trusting that are already cracked at the foundation? Think about it. She lived in a time without internet, without global news, and yet she spoke of things we're only now beginning to understand: cyber war, digital surveillance, even psychological manipulation. And maybe that's what makes her vision so frightening. It wasn't about one bomb or one day. It was about a chain reaction, a storm that begins in one place and ripples outward until everything we thought was permanent isn't. So when Vanga said, there will be a moment when the sky will burn and no one will be able to tell the difference between night and day, she wasn't just predicting weather, she was predicting blindness, the kind that comes from ignoring the signs for too long. And if we look closely, maybe the war she saw has already started, not with tanks, but with division, with fear disguised as patriotism, with truth twisted until we no longer recognize it. Vanga warned of leaders who would speak peace but prepare for war, of agreements signed with one hand while the other hand loads the weapon. These aren't just metaphors. These are headlines. These are briefings from today. She said the skies would change color not just from fire, but from confusion. And today, satellites, surveillance, and chemical reactions in the atmosphere are altering how we see even the weather itself. Her words weren't predictions. They were reflections, like a mirror held up to humanity. And if we're honest, the reflection isn't looking great, but there's still a choice. Because while her prophecy described fire, it also hinted at something else. A shift, a rebalance, a great remembering of who we were before the rage, before the greed, before the hunger to control. And maybe, just maybe, that's the part we still have time to change. So how much of what Vanga said actually lines up with what's happening right now? Let's start with something simple. She warned of a desert conflict that would drag in the world's biggest powers. Sound familiar today? Israel and Iran are on the brink. The United States and Russia are circling like vultures over every headline. And the Middle East once again is a powder keg ready to blow. She spoke of fire from the skies. Back then, nobody could understand it. But now, we live in a world where drones can strike silently from 1,000 miles away, where hypersonic missiles can cross borders in minutes, where fire literally rains down from above and no one even sees it coming. She talked about a sickness spreading not through people, but through information. Does that sound like misinformation? Like viral propaganda, like online radicalization? Because those are the real weapons now, not bullets ideas, not tanks algorithms. Remember when she mentioned the blackbirds crashing into tall towers? That one came chillingly close to reality on September 11th, 2001. 2 passenger planes turned into weapons. A moment the world still hasn't fully healed from. She saw that too. Then there's the part about the land of prophets bleeding. Look at Syria. Look at Gaza, Yemen, Lebanon. Each one once rich with faith, story, legacy. Now they're news tickers of destruction, just like she said. There's also something else she said, that 3 great nations would face simultaneous crisis. Some think she meant war. Others believe it's about economic collapse, cultural breakdown, or political implosion. Look at what's happening with the US, Russia, and China right now. Trade wars, proxy conflicts, civil unrest. Coincidence? Skeptics will say it's just interpretation, that anyone can make vague predictions and match them to real events. And that's fair up to a point. But when the pattern keeps repeating, when her metaphors start looking like modern warfare, maybe it's time to stop dismissing and start listening. Maybe she didn't predict the future as much as she understood human nature. How power breeds conflict, how pride blinds nations, how history, when ignored, becomes prophecy. And that's what's happening now. We're not watching predictions come true, we're watching warnings go unheeded. And here's the scary part. She said the real danger wouldn't be just in the first strike. It would be in how quickly people normalize it. The speed at which humanity forgets, moves on, scrolls past suffering as if it's just another headline. And in that forgetting, we lose something vital, our ability to change course, to see the fire before it spreads. Because the truth is, most prophecies aren't about fate. They're about warning, about giving us a moment, just a sliver of time, to choose differently. So what if Vanga wasn't some mystic from the mountains? What if she was simply a mirror showing us who we are, what we do, and what happens if we keep choosing violence over vision? One of the most cryptic things Vanga ever said was this: people will follow the light that blinds them. At the time, it didn't make much sense, but now it sounds like she was describing the world we're living in. We live in an age where truth is optional, where deepfakes look more real than real footage, where algorithms feed us what we want to hear, not what we need to know, and where every voice, no matter how extreme or dangerous, can find a stage. Vanga warned of a time when the real danger wouldn't be war, but confusion, the inability to tell truth from fiction. She spoke of leaders who wear light like a cloak, and saviors who offer poison in golden cups. That sounds like poetic nonsense until you realize how many people now follow influencers, leaders, or ideologies, not because they're right, but because they're loud, shiny, and comforting. She didn't know about social media, but she knew the danger of illusion, of being hypnotized by appearances. And in today's world, appearance is everything. Perception beats facts. Feelings overpower evidence, and fear gets more clicks than wisdom. Look around. Fake news spreads faster than real news. Conspiracy theories have more engagement than verified science. People no longer just disagree, they live in completely different realities. Realities curated by companies that profit off division. That's the false light she was talking about. A glow that promises clarity, but delivers chaos. A comfort that sedates your thinking. A kind of light that doesn't guide, it blinds. And once you're blinded, you're vulnerable. You trust the wrong people. You fear the wrong threats. You prepare for battles that aren't even real, while the real danger sneaks in through the back door. But here's the thing, she also hinted that some would see through it, that not everyone would fall, that those who listen with the heart, not just the ear, will recognize the flicker from the flame. Maybe that's us. Maybe the reason you're hearing this now is because you haven't been blinded yet. Because something in you knows the difference between noise and signal, between panic and prophecy. And if that's true, then we still have time to turn toward the real light. And maybe that's the most dangerous weapon of all: comfort. When people feel safe in lies, they stop questioning. When they feel validated by manipulation, they stop thinking. And slowly, without even realizing it, entire societies become easy to lead, easy to deceive, easy to destroy. Prophecies like this weren't designed to scare us. They were designed to snap us out of the trance, to shake us by the shoulders and say, "Wake up. Not everything that glows is good. Not every bright path leads forward. Sometimes, the truth is quieter, but it's still there, waiting to be noticed. Not everything Vanga predicted has happened yet, and that might be the most unsettling part. She spoke of a time when 3 great powers would fall not in flames, but in fractures, economies crumbling from within, trust eroding like sand underfoot, governments fighting themselves. She didn't name the countries, but many believe she was talking about the United States, Russia, and China. Now think about it. In the USA, political division is deeper than ever. Conspiracy theories run wild. Violence erupts over ideology. Russia is locked in a prolonged war, bleeding resources and morale. China faces unrest, demographic decline, and economic stagnation beneath its polished surface. All 3 appear strong on the outside, but what if the real danger is on the inside? Vanga also described a silent rebellion that would begin not with protests or riots, but with disappearance. People walking away, systems quietly failing, a breakdown not televised but deeply felt. Another thing she mentioned was a small country, ignored for generations, that will rise through machines, not armies. Some think that points to cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, the power to disrupt without firing a single shot. It's no longer science fiction. One algorithm can now influence an election. One virus can halt a city. She hinted at a shift not just in power, but in perception, that a new language will rise, not of words, but of control. That may sound dramatic, but look at how fast facial recognition, biometric data, and behavior prediction are becoming everyday tools. We're not being told what to think, we're being taught how to think. Trained without knowing we're being trained. What makes these predictions chilling is how plausible they've become. Not because of magic, but because of momentum. Technology, fear, and politics have always danced together, but now they're moving in perfect sync. So while we're distracted by bombs and borderlines, Vanga may have been pointing to something else entirely. A war not of weapons, but of narratives. Not of nations, but of realities. And maybe that war hasn't started yet. Or maybe it already has, and we're just too immersed in the noise to notice. She even warned about a moment when communication itself would break down, where people would speak, but not be heard, where everyone talks, but no one listens. Social media, endless debates, digital shouting matches. Have we not already arrived there? And maybe that's the point. The biggest prophecies don't come with trumpets or lightning. They come quietly, in patterns, in trends, in choices we make every single day, what we click, what we ignore, who we trust. Because prophecy isn't about doom, it's about decision. And Vanga's words might still be waiting for us to answer. One of Vanga's most overlooked warnings was this: the empire will not fall from the outside. It will collapse from within. Its own hands will undo what took centuries to build. She wasn't just talking about countries. She was talking about alliances, about unions built on convenience, not trust. Agreements held together by fear, not loyalty. Look at what's happening right now. NATO is tense. Some members are questioning the cost of involvement in wars that aren't theirs. Others openly refuse to join future conflicts. The EU is fractured over migration, economics, and foreign policy. Even the United Nations, once a symbol of global cooperation, struggles to enforce peace without stepping on political landmines. And it's not just Europe. In the Middle East, old alliances are shifting. Countries once united by religion or trade now pull in opposite directions. Turkey takes one path, Saudi Arabia takes another. Israel moves alone. Iran works through proxies. It's a map constantly redrawn in real time. Vanga said, "The ones who share bread today will draw swords tomorrow." It sounded dramatic, but now it feels eerily accurate. She described a future where betrayal doesn't come from enemies, it comes from friends, from the inside, from leaders who say one thing and plan another, from nations that sign peace accords while stockpiling weapons. And she was right. Recent leaks have shown internal dissent within alliances, whistleblowers, secret deals, countries building backdoor coalitions for influence and control. Trust, once lost, is almost impossible to rebuild. This kind of collapse isn't sudden, it's slow, quiet, like termites in the foundation of a house. You don't notice until the roof caves in. The world is watching for missiles and tanks. But maybe we should be watching for silence, for hesitation. For the moment, an ally pauses and doesn't answer the call, because when the ties that bind are only paper thin, it doesn't take a bomb to break them. Just fear, just pride, just enough doubt to turn unity into isolation. And when that happens, Vanga warned, the roar of the lion will become the whisper of the lamb. And by the time we hear that whisper, it might be too late. The truth is, no system, no matter how powerful, can survive without trust. And right now, trust is in short supply. Global institutions are under attack from both the outside and within. Democracies question their own elections. Treaties are broken without consequence. And people, the very foundation of these alliances, are growing more divided every day. Vanga may not have named these alliances, but she understood something crucial. Unity is not about documents or flags. It's about shared values. And once those values erode, the fall isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Vanga once said that the most dangerous weapon wouldn't be a bomb or a missile. It would be something no one could see, something that lives inside people. Their hate, their rage, their need to dominate. At first glance, that sounds like spiritual fluff. But step back and look around. How many conflicts today started because of some ancient anger, some historic wound that never healed? How many decisions are driven not by logic, but by pride, resentment, or fear? Energy is real. You can feel it when you walk into a room after a fight. You can sense it in a crowd when panic spreads. You can feel tension before a riot ever starts. That's not superstition, that's the psychology of groups, the collective nervous system of humanity. And when enough people feel fear, distrust, or bitterness, things break, societies fracture, violence erupts, not because someone gave an order, but because the energy tipped too far into darkness. Vanga warned of a time when the earth itself would seem angry, when storms would grow, fires would spread, and animals would behave strangely. She believed these weren't just climate events, they were reflections of human emotion, that we pour our energy into the planet, and the planet responds. Call it mysticism, or call it karma. But cultures across the world have said the same thing for centuries. What we give out, we get back. So maybe the real war isn't just out there, it's inside us. In the way we think, the way we judge, the way we choose who to love, who to blame, and who to ignore. Because fear is contagious, so is anger, but so is peace, so is clarity, so is compassion. If Vanga was right, then the most effective weapon we have right now isn't a treaty or a drone, it's the energy we carry into every room, every conversation, every conflict. And maybe that's what she meant when she said, not all light comes from the sky, some light begins in the heart. In times of war, staying calm is radical, staying kind is revolutionary, and choosing healing over hate, that might be the only thing that rewrites the ending. We often underestimate how much power we have in our daily emotions, the things we post, the way we speak to our kids, the thoughts we repeat to ourselves. Every single one of those adds to the global current we're all swimming in. You don't need a title or a position to shape the future. You just need awareness. The kind that makes you pause before reacting. The kind that remembers we're all connected. And if enough of us remember that, maybe this path of fire can still turn into something else. Vanga didn't just leave us with doom. She also left a glimmer of something else, a path, a choice. She said that not all would perish, that there would be survivors not just in body, but in spirit. People who chose to live differently, to think differently, to carry peace instead of pride, understanding instead of judgment, light instead of heat. She called them the quiet ones, the ones who listen more than they speak, who feel the world before trying to fix it, who refuse to add fuel to the fire, even when the fire is right at their door. Maybe those people are already here. Maybe you're one of them. Because in a world that's tearing itself apart with noise and fear, being calm is a rebellion. Being compassionate is an act of courage. And being awake, truly awake, is the most dangerous thing of all. Because when you're awake, you can't be manipulated. You can't be divided. You can't be used as a pawn in someone else's game. Vanga hinted that the world wouldn't end, but shift. That a new kind of balance would rise, not built on power or control, but on connection, on awareness, on memory, a remembering of who we really are underneath all the flags, the fears, the histories, and maybe that's the real reason she spoke in riddles. Because answers aren't what we need right now. We need responsibility, reflection, the willingness to see beyond headlines and hashtags and ask deeper questions. What kind of world are we feeding with our energy, our words, our silence? What kind of future are we building not with weapons, but with choices? We're not too far gone. Not yet. The fire is close, yes, but so is the water. And if you've made it this far into the message, maybe you were meant to. Maybe you're not here to watch it all fall apart, but to be one of the reasons it holds. So ask yourself, what are you really here for? To repeat history or to rewrite it? History is loud, but transformation, it's usually quiet. It begins in living rooms, in late-night thoughts, in small acts of courage that no one else sees. That's where change really starts, not in headlines, but in hearts. So maybe Vanga wasn't just predicting the future. Maybe she was passing the torch, whispering across time that the future isn't written in stone. It's written in choices. Yours, mine, ours. Because every ending contains the seed of a beginning, and every warning, if heard in time, becomes a chance, not a sentence. That's what Vanga left us. Not fear, but a fork in the road. And the road we choose next will define everything. Imagine this. The sirens go off, but no one moves. People are too used to the sound. Cities are quiet, not with peace, but with power outages. Communications jammed, satellites blinded, and above it all, a sky that glows. Not with sunrise, but with something else entirely. Vanga once said there would be a day when people wouldn't know if it was night or day. That the air would feel thick, that animals would flee before humans do, and that silence, not screaming, would be the scariest sound. It sounds like science fiction, until you read about modern EMP weapons, until you see how cyber attacks can disable entire grids, until you realize how fragile everything really is. This isn't about fear, it's about recognition, because the final moments of a system rarely look like collapse. They look like routine, a normal day, a broadcast that suddenly cuts, a phone that won't connect, a sky that feels off, but you can't explain why. And then the cascade begins. Supply chains freeze, banks delay transactions, emergency systems fail. People panic not because of a bomb, but because nothing works. Civilization doesn't explode, it unplugs. That's what makes this so terrifying. Not the scale, the subtlety, the slow motion unraveling of everything we rely on. And maybe that's what Vanga saw. Not a mushroom cloud, but a quiet fall, a descent into something unfamiliar, where logic fails, where neighbors turn, where leaders disappear. But here's the most haunting part. She said it would happen so fast. People wouldn't have time to say goodbye. One day, life would look normal. The next it wouldn't. So maybe this isn't a warning to stock up on supplies. Maybe it's a warning to stock up on something else. like connection, like clarity, like courage. Because when the lights go out, what's left is who we are. This isn't about choosing fear. It's about choosing awareness. Because being prepared isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. And sometimes, just seeing what's possible is enough to change the outcome. Because what happens next isn't set in stone. It's shaped by what we notice, what we feel, and what we do before the final switch flips. Think of history. Most empires didn't fall in one day. Rome didn't burn in an hour. It decayed, piece by piece, while its people entertained themselves into numbness. They looked away. They joked. They stayed busy. Until the ground beneath them gave out. That's why Vanga's prophecy hits so deep, because it's not just about politics or weapons. It's about blindness, about distraction, about the price we pay for ignoring what feels too big, too scary, too far away. But the truth, it's not far. It's already here. And if we can sense the shift, maybe we can slow it or soften it, or at least face it together. Because in the end, the future doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of now. So what do we do with all of this? With the warnings, the signs, the eerie alignments between what was once whispered in the shadows and what now screams from the headlines? We don't panic, we don't retreat, and we don't look away. Instead, we pause, we breathe. We take a long, hard look at the kind of world we're building and the kind of people we're becoming. Because if Vanga's words hold any truth, they aren't here to trap us in fear. They're here to invite us into awareness, into responsibility, into remembering that we are not powerless, that prophecy is not destiny. It's a mirror, and it's asking, what do you see? You see, most people think of prophecy as a sentence, as something carved in stone, out of reach. But maybe it's more like a question, an invitation, a path with more than one fork. And maybe right now, we still have time to choose the better one. So here's the real takeaway. The fire is not the problem. It's what we do when we see the smoke. Do we sound the alarm, or do we scroll past it? Tell ourselves it's someone else's fire, someone else's fate. Because the future isn't waiting for us to be perfect. It's just asking us to be present, to see clearly, to feel deeply, to act boldly, not in fear, but in truth. And if you've made it this far, if you're still listening, it means something inside you already knows that. So now, we ask you to be part of what happens next. Share this message not because it's dramatic, but because it's needed. Share it with someone who's been feeling the same strange pressure in their chest, the same dreams, the same questions. Share it with someone who's waking up. And if this resonated with you, leave a comment below with the words, "I see the signs." Let us know we're not alone, because what comes next might be uncertain. But how we face it, that's still up to us. Let's make sure the future isn't something that happens to us, but something we meet with eyes wide open. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what Vanga was hoping for. You don't need to believe in every prophecy to feel that something is shifting. The air feels different. The pace of life, the pressure under the surface of normal days. That's not your imagination. That's your intuition catching up with reality. So listen to that. Lean into it. Let it guide you toward conversations that matter, actions that count, and awareness that expands beyond the next headline. Because staying awake, that's the real miracle. Because at the end of the day, the biggest danger isn't war or collapse or even prophecy itself. The biggest danger is indifference. It's the belief that our actions don't matter, that we're just spectators in a story we didn't write. But that's not true. We're not spectators. We're authors. Every choice we make, what we believe, what we support, what we love, writes the future one sentence at a time. So let's make it count, not with fear, but with fire, the good kind, the kind that lights the way